Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240. Well, we're chatting about Congressman Jones. Be wrapping it up with our guest here, Bob Pruitt, in just a moment. But Bob is joining us by phone. And Bob, I just thought I'd share this bit of information. We're seeing Associated Press about the funeral arrangements, but I've got more details. Visitation will be Wednesday evening, 4 to 8 p.m. at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Greenville. So Wednesday evening, visitation, 4 to 8 p.m., St. Peter's Catholic Church in Greenville. I'll make a note about that in a moment. And the funeral will be taking place at the same location Thursday afternoon at 1:30. So Thursday afternoon is the actual funeral services, and then, of course, visitation Wednesday evening, 4 to 8 p.m. And Bob Pruitt joins us from the North Carolina Federation of Republican Men, former chairman of Carter County Republican Party. And with that, Bob, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Good afternoon, Lockwood, and hello to everybody that might be listening in today.
This is I'm looking at the 4 to 8 for visitation. I've got a bet on. I bet you the family doesn't get out of there till maybe 11 o'clock tomorrow, Wednesday evening.
I was just visualizing. You know, you've heard the about the lines waiting in to get into some of the appearances from our current president whenever he was running for election. I can imagine that the lines for the funeral, for the visitation for Walter, will be something similar to that. It'll be wrapped around the block and all the way around the other one.
I can imagine, and I'm thinking that people will start showing up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just so that they can get there before the line really becomes too long. But so for those who are listening, 4 to 8 p.m. Wednesday, St. Peter's Catholic Church in Greenville, and then 1:30 Thursday will be the funeral services, and likewise, it'll probably be very crowded there as well, which is a testimony to the number of people that the congressman has contacted and made contact with. I want to make one observation on this one, Bob. In many regards, and we, this is stated factually. As a matter of fact, it's noted in all the articles that he was a maverick, that he was not always well received by members of his own party. And, of course, leadership in the House, John Boehner, singled him out, for a matter of fact. Yet, one thing's for sure, he was persistent in his approach. So he never had, as a matter of fact, because of his maverick nature, never really got much in the way of senior leadership within the House. But interestingly enough, Bob, he kept getting reelected. So in many regards, it was that constituent service, if you will, that was his strong suit, is it not?
Well, absolutely. And that's the thing that most everybody will say to you. I met Walter the first time in 2005 when I became the county chair in Carteret. And one of the first things that he told me is that he voted his conscience.
Right.
and after he and I had several discussions regarding what his conscience should or should not be listening to, we both had a very high respect for each other as far as the stand that we took. Each one of us obviously was passionate.
Right.
I'm a retired military, and obviously, we don't take any prisoners. But whenever we got together, Walter and I had very good conversations about anything that we wanted to deal with, and he was always straight up with me. Never wavered from his position. If it cost money, he didn't want to do it, and if it was going to be anything that would make him or the district look bad, he didn't want to do it. So we had a very good understanding on that, and I respected him very much for that.
The other aspect you said about the costing of money, that was another one of his constant drumbeats was national debt. And there were times when he would, and I remember chatting with him about several instances, I think one having to do with Veterans Affairs, now Veterans Administration, but the topic of voting for improvements. And he pointedly said to me he could not vote for it because it was only going to increase the national debt. And he kept saying there are other ways to pay for these services, particularly restricting or, if you will, removing foreign aid and payments to other countries, one of them being Iraq and some of the other countries that we were paying actually to maintain peace. So he was not afraid, and that's an interesting nature and personality trait. He was not hesitant to stand firm on his principles. So yeah, I can appreciate from a perspective of a political party and a political organization where you're trying to build a broader base, how sometimes his very principles were contrary to what you were trying to do in many instances, right?
Absolutely. Well, and the beautiful part about it though is that any of us can change our mind based on circumstances that develop as they go. Right. And I think Walter changed his mind on the war in Iran.
Big time.
Is a very good example of that. He was very adamant about that we need to get out of there after he decided, after he looked at it from a different perspective. And you've got to admire somebody like that also. Mm-hmm. Very few people will admit that they've made a mistake. But once the circumstances change, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind.
Good point. Very good point on that one. And by the way, I just have to mention, since you are military, the congressman and I, he would always gig me because knowing that I'm a sailor, a squiddy, as they say. I always say, and we argued on this one on numerous occasions years back on changing the name from the U.S. Navy, Department of the Navy, to Department of the Navy and Marine Corps. So, and I was always fighting him on that as well. All right, just for those who might just now be joining us, just to remind you, Bob Pruitt's with us for a few minutes here. He is president of the North Carolina Federation of Republican Men, and we have given details 4 to 8 p.m. Wednesday evening at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Greenville will be visitation. Expect it to be long past 8 p.m., by the way. And 1:30 Thursday afternoon will be the celebration of his life and our funeral. All right, Bob, let's talk here about some technical issues and that have been asked to me on several occasions. And I'm going to go ahead and state what I've said so that you can correct me. I'm strong enough that I can handle it. It is the governor's prerogative or responsibility to establish an election, a special election. It will be for the Republicans only, is my first comment. And second, it will require a primary. So am I correct on that?
Almost. It is the governor's responsibility and prerogative to announce a special election. Unfortunately, in a special election of this site, it is not restricted to the Republican or the party of the incumbent. Oh. It is a open primary and an open. That's the reason you would do the primary then, of course, and then you have a general election. If it were just Republican, we would only have a primary. So this could be a situation where we develop into a full-scale election cycle regarding this particular district, just like we have already been through earlier last year.
Now, question for you, and again, this is probably speculative on your part, so I'm just kind of asking this casually. Would this in any
I'm
way...
not afraid to do that either.
Okay, thank you very much. Would this also impact the potential election of the 9th Congressional District, or would you anticipate those would be totally two separate events altogether?
Well, you would like to think that everything stands on its own, but right. I can assure you that anything that's taken place that is taking visibility from anything else is going to have some minor impact. Okay. The Board of Elections should be dealing with the 9th District here very shortly. And if they do not take a stand, then that will become the election as it stands at this point in time will become history.
Right.
It will
law.
Mark Harris would take the seat in Congress, and then the Congress would be the one that would have to determine whether there was enough information relative to any kind of election questions that they would or would not seat the elected candidate.
All right, and so we're now looking for a general election to fill the seat formerly occupied by the late Walter Jones. And as our guest Bob Pruitt has pointed out, this would be basically an open election, and so of course the establishment of this election is at the governor's prerogative. It could happen. In other words, he could announce it to take place in May or in October when we normally have elections. So any number of that, any time frame in that era.
That is correct. He, to my knowledge, he does not have a specific time frame that he is required to call it within. However, once he does call the election, all of the time frames that are built into the statutes, the election statutes and rules and regulations, do take place. Okay. You have X number of days from filing, X number of days from announcing, and everything would be taking place just as the same if it were a regular election.
All right. Bob Pruitt with us this evening. And Bob, I do appreciate your clarity on that. There have been several questions that have been asked about this. And I think this is an important topic in light of the fact that we have to have representation in Washington, D.C. Bob, stay with me. I want to chat with you briefly off air, but I do appreciate your time. For those who have just joined us, just to verify what I said earlier, clarify, the visitation for Congressman Jones will be at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Greenville Wednesday evening, 4 to 8 p.m. And then the funeral, celebration of his life, 1:30 p.m. on Thursday, also at St. Peter's Catholic Church. You're listening to Viewpoints here on the Talk Station. And Bob, thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lockwood.